Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you this morning. And as we join in this time of worship, I encourage you to take a moment with me to meditate and to pray. If it's comfortable to you, please close your eyes and just take a few centering deep breaths. Breathing deeply, we can relax our body and our mind. We can turn our attention to the presence of that power and presence within us, the presence of love. We are one with that love. We are one with this life and with the presence that is infinite and eternal. And so in a time of meditation, from this awareness, we can begin to let go of some things. We can let go of some stress or worry. We can let go of any sense of lack, unworthiness, inadequacy. And we can see that beyond the appearance of those things, we know there is an event or a circumstance or a situation in our individual life where we can once again apply the knowing of that one power and presence, the wellspring and source of all life, where we come into that true knowing that we lack for nothing, that we are unlimited. So let us take just a moment in this silent place to give thanks for this knowledge, for our world, for those that we love, for our own individual life, for this next holy breath. Let us take a moment now to just breathe into that place where we come to the realization that this and all things are the very essence of the divine. And in meditation and in silence, we can deepen our awareness of our spiritual connection to the power and the presence of that divine love. As we join our individual prayers with others, we pause and we allow Spirit now to respond in the silence. And with our hearts deepened and centered, we can vow something now. We can vow to allow the full access of that divine love to radiate through us, to nurture us, to renew us. For we are one in the spirit of that which we call God. So we can open ourselves fully and completely to the sacredness of that indwelling Christ presence within. And as the prayers and the meditations of this place resonate, let's hold on to that feeling of oneness. And let us surrender mind and heart to the holy presence. And so it is. Amen. Amen. Well, it is always good to be with you, and especially on this first Sunday of Advent. I was telling Reverend Mary Ann Harris, this is one of my favorite seasons. These 4 holy weeks leading up to Christmas. Some of you may have grown up in a religion or a family that celebrated Advent. I know I did. Perhaps you had one of those little Advent calendars that was full of trinkets and toys or chocolate. I remember in my childhood how difficult it was to wait day by day for us to be able to open one of those little doors on the calendar to see which toy or which trinket was ours today. You know, Advent has been celebrated for centuries, since the 5th century to be exact. And according to most Christian traditions, this is those 4 weeks that is just before the coming of the Christ. And so the celebration in traditional Christianity really views Advent as a commemoration of Jesus' birth over 2,000 years ago, which was an external historic event. But New Thought, and Unity in particular, takes a metaphysical approach to Advent, which is a spiritual journey in consciousness, an inward journey towards our wholeness. The Latin root for Advent is adventus, which means coming or a new beginning. Metaphysically, the Advent season is really a time of increasing our awareness of just that, of our capacity to experience the Christ or that divine presence within us and to begin anew. Of course, there's the preparations of whatever celebrations and services and traditions we have, but deeper than that, beyond the hustle and the bustle of the holiday parties and the tinsel and the shopping and the gifts, what within us needs to be tended to over these 4 weeks before that holy day? In the moments before the coming, in this now beginning of what is about to be birthed within us, within our own consciousness. You know, we do regular maintenance on all of the important things in life. We change the battery in the smoke alarm. We do regular home maintenance on the yard or within our house. We change filters. I know I just changed the heater filter this last week, and I'm so glad I did. We had a touch of snow this morning. But what needs to be prepared in our own sense of becoming? You know, when you look at the word becoming, it really tells the story of Advent. To be able to understand when we throw that word in the mirror of life, it comes back and says, coming to be. We are getting ready, coming to be something new. In these 4 weeks that are ahead of us, I hope you will understand exactly what Advent might mean to you individually. Today, as BB lit that first candle, we know that with both hope and faith, especially in unity, perhaps it's inspired by the view that faith is the assurance of things hoped for. And we can contemplate both hope and faith as we spiritually prepare our hearts and minds. Week 2 will be focused on the spiritual power and practice of peace, realizing that in conflict or chaos, we always have a choice. And then week 3 centers on love. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore once wrote that the nature of God is love. So we too are the true nature of just that. And then week 4 is the week of joy. And that includes both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And joy is that powerful, powerful emotion that lights up our brain and lifts our heart and spirit. And then, of course, on Christmas Day, we have completed the Advent preparations and we celebrate the arrival of the Christ child, of that presence born anew within us, where we become even more focused. And so today we center on hope and faith. And you know, it's interesting because of all the spiritual faculties, the one that Jesus spoke of most was the faith. Have faith, believe, trust, move mountains. And over, Jesus emphasized the spiritual power. And in one of his disciples, we watch how that faculty developed. Simon, the crude fisherman, became Peter, the dedicated apostle. And we see the ability to trust something within us, beyond us, to grow, to mature, to be invited, to be made welcome, to rise up, to become. And so the disciple Peter, whose name means rock, represents faith in all things spiritual, faith in God, faith in goodness, faith in the divine. And faith is part of the foundation of all that man does. Jesus himself called it the kingdom of the heavens. Now, metaphysically and psychologically, we understand, as BB mentioned, that there is a continuum between these two things of hope and faith. It starts out as hope. We understand that hope is the natural part of our lives, the foundation upon which we can build something. It's the assurance that possibilities can and do become realities. Hope is what arises within us when we just glimpse a new possibility. And those little flashes of insight inspire us to a positive, forward-facing change, like a newborn baby coming. Now, sometimes it's difficult to hope in such turbulent times as we live in. Sometimes we think that hope is not even a thing anymore in some parts of the world. But hope is simple, because hope is sometimes all that is even found when one identifies as hopeless. Because hope against all hope, maybe you've heard, is something. It really means this, that you can hope that it doesn't get any worse than this. You can hope that this is the end. And with that, there is still the active emotion of hope. So think about it like this. Simon, hope, grew into Peter, faith. But between those two things on the continuum, there is something else. There is the understanding that you have to insert your belief here. You have to believe in that which you've hoped for. You have to faith that which you are believing. You know, just like I have shared on many occasions, possibly even with you, I come from a long line of farmers. My grandfather would tend to a garden an acre big. And I can remember the belief that he had as he planted each of the seeds year after year. He believed in the kernel of corn that he planted. He didn't doubt it because he had the knowledge of the way it worked. He believed in the evolution of that which was under the ground. It's invisible. It was unseen. You couldn't see that seed after the dirt was piled on top of it. But from that moment, he trusted the forces beyond himself, beyond his control. His work was done. He had prepared. He had tended the soil. And now, as he planted it and he believed, then he was open and receptive. You know, it was interesting to watch him because after he would plant everything, and there would be row and row and row of what looked like just organized dirt, he would point and he would say, under that dirt is something. But he didn't say it like under that dirt is a seed. He actually pointed and said, there's the corn, there's the beans, there's the potatoes, there's the fruit trees, even without fruit on them. And at times like that, we can understand that we can have two contradictory beliefs concurrently. Because we can believe, just as we have been taught to, in the worth and the value within. But when you've had a really low period in your life, maybe the money's gotten tight, or you can't catch a break, or just because you woke up with a bad hair day, whatever the case is, there is that moment where we are betrayed by a residual belief of our unworthiness, of our inadequacy. But Jesus taught that you don't need much faith to get through that. He said, if you have the faith, the seed, the size of a mustard seed, then you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will be moved. And when you can transform your limiting beliefs, when you can put words to your hope, then you enter that domain of faith. And if you're lacking the faith to pursue big dreams, start with the smaller ones. Play with this a little bit. Jesus said, with faith, you can look at that mountain. That mountain is your obstacle. It is the problem in your life. It is the limitation, the unlucky, unfortunate thing. And you can look at that and say, be ye moved, and it will be. Which means hope is the precursor to faith. We have to understand hope in a different way. Charles Fillmore, our Unity co-founder, described hope as the expectation of good in the future. He went on to say hope is the quality of sense mind because it is subject to time, because it's in the future. But he talked about faith in a different way. He said faith is the certain knowledge that good is ours right now. Right now. And so hope and faith invites us to consider what we believe and to the degree by which we trust. For example, you believed, without even consciously being aware of it, that the sun would come up this morning. I mean, you had enough evidence of that happening throughout your life experience to know that that was going to happen again. You understood and had faith that the Earth would remain spinning in its orbit in precise and constant precision to all the other planets and not get bumped about in the cosmos. You believed and had faith that your blood would keep pumping all night and the oxygen would stay on without you having to flip a switch. Do we have faith that we are loved to that degree by that God or whatever name you give the divine? Do we know that there's nothing that we cannot overcome through the power of that Christ presence within? Do we truly understand, because we have the consciousness of choice, that all things are possible? You know, the writer of Hebrews referred to this kind of faith as the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence or conviction of things not yet seen. And when we understand it in that light, faith is that quality in us which enables us to look past the mountain, to look past the appearance of whatever the problem is, to look past lack or limitation or difficulty, and then to take hold of the divine idea in the future and believe in it, even though we do not have the evidence of it except in our mind. And through faith, we know with an inner knowing. What that means is there's no need to believe what you have to accomplish is this specific thing. You just have to believe you can accomplish this specific thing. You have to believe that your emotions never lie to you. You have to believe that your body keeps score. You have to know that your emotions are giving you feedback, whether you are in alignment with that one presence and one power or out of alignment with it. And so the metaphysical interpretation of the location of our faith is really interesting. We often think that faith might live kind of in our stomach area where we feel that intuition, that gut knowing, but that's not where faith lives. Metaphysically, we understand that it's centered in our head. I can't even point to it because it's centered between the ears, behind the eyes. And when we put our faith in that which we see with our physical eyes and with hearing only with our outer physical ears, then we're using the faculty of faith in a very limited way, and our results are going to come accordingly. But when we can center the faculty of our faith with our inner vision, with our inner hearing, and we can develop that faculty through prayer and meditation to know the potential that God already knows. When we do that, our results will express the higher realization of that spiritual nature. So, want to know what to expect when you apply your faith? You can expect two things. First, you can expect that after you have hope, there is a belief. There is a belief which you tend to through the principle and the practice of prayer. And the second thing that you can expect while you apply your faith is this. You can expect to wait. You can expect not only to wait patiently, but to wait and to watch and to listen and to learn. Because while we wait, we do learn. We learn humility, we learn compassion, we learn non-resistance, we learn patience, we learn acceptance and self-love. And these are the qualities that we value most in all the other people in the world. So we have to strive to live this way and express our own qualities. But so many times we fail at this. We fail because these qualities cannot live in the world until they live in us. In just a few minutes, we're going to sing a song that says, I want peace in the world, but it must begin with me. Peace begins with me, and so does everything else. Some of you will remember back in the day when you could go to the airport and pick up your friend or loved one. And when you did, you could go all the way to the terminal, to the gate. You could walk down the concourse through the terminal all the way to the gate. Do you remember that? You can't do that anymore. You have to meet them at baggage claim. But when we were able to do that, we would take that hike through the airport and we would stand off the carpeted area and we would have perfect line of sight into the sky bridge from which our friend or our loved one would soon emerge. And while we waited for them, we began to do what? People watch. It's the best thing about an airport. We would stand around and just people watch while we waited. You were momentarily distracted. Some people were arriving at a different gate. Others were departing over there. You would see happy reunions. You would see people eating, people sleeping, kids playing. I can remember when I used to travel every week of my life by plane. I was in the Atlanta airport and I almost missed a flight because I was people watching. And what I was doing was I was noticing that all of a sudden, this was a long time ago, a police officer me on a Segway, one of those little two-wheel things. And that was brand new then. I had never seen one until I was in the Atlanta airport and security was on a Segway. And so I was distracted, lost in thought, thinking, oh my goodness, what a cool machine. I wish I had one. I wonder how much they cost. Do you really need a helmet? I mean, all of these thoughts were going on and on and on. Where's the spare tire? And so I was distracted to the point that they had to call my name, even though I was sitting there at the gate. We are distracted for a few moments from waiting, often. Just as you were distracted for a few moments while you were waiting on your friend, now when you turn your eyes to return to that sky bridge and you notice people coming, you realize you've been waiting and watching. You were persistent, you were patient, you were focused on the coming of your friend, but you were also distracted in your waiting. But here's the thing, your momentary lack of focus on that concourse exit did not mean you wanted to see your friend any less. Allowing ourselves to be distracted does not mean we are a failure. The distractions are part of the waiting. And through our spiritual waiting, by which we're guided through that prayer and meditation experience, we wait and we notice that our waiting is not passive. Our work is unconditional observation. We are becoming sensitive to what's moving, not around us, but within us. Essentially, what we're doing is we're answering the philosopher's maxim, to know thyself. And we can experience the feelings that move deep within us. We can be distracted by that for just a little while and ask the deep, nurturing questions about it. You know, as a counselor, I often will talk to me about what they describe as their crisis of faith. You've heard that term. And most of the time, we're really not in much of a crisis of faith. You are having a crisis, possibly, or rather you're working from a consciousness of crisis, much like we work from a consciousness of fear or a consciousness of lack. But when we look at that obstacle, that mountain, and we apply the understanding of the universal law that whatever you give your attention to will grow, then what we're looking at isn't necessarily this big, hairy, scary thing that's been planted in consciousness and grown so big that it's not able to be overcome. But we can look at it beyond the appearance of that mountain, where our faith has potential. Because by our faith, we could learn to say, be ye moved now, and it will be. And then we can reapply our faith back into the equation, no longer in a crisis of faith, but now an opportunity for faith. And so you can trust with all of this that there is an absence of something. It's the presence. It's that presence. And if you can trust that beyond the absence there is that presence, then you can trust that beyond your pain there is healing, that beyond your brokenness there is wholeness, that beyond your hurting there can be forgiveness, that beyond a silent place there is celebration, beyond all manner of fear there is love. Neither waiting nor faith are an inactive thing. We have to exercise our faculties. We have to say yes to our good. We have to see it spiritually first, holding it in mind, believing in it, trusting it, bringing it forth into manifestation. It matters not how many words I offer. What it really comes down to is it has to feel only like a knowing. Our fifth unity principle talks about this. To know our truth is to live our truth. To know something, to be aware of it through observation, inquiry, information, distraction, we can live the experience. Charles Fillmore wrote that faith is the perceiving power of the mind with the power to shape substance. Faith is our ability to see beyond the appearance of the obstacle and see the possibility of life. This season, again, is one of my favorites because it really tells the story. And it doesn't just tell the story, it tells a lot of stories. And our goal, our hope and faith lies in finding the truthful story. You know, the prophets of Israel all spoke of the coming of the Christ. of how a savior would be born, a king in the line of David. They spoke of how he would rule the world wisely. He would bless all nations. And then something happened. The story grew to be a story. Because we celebrate Christmas in December, when historians tell us that it was probably more like June or September, a more probable time for a census to be taken in the Holy Land. And even more importantly, and improbably of a story, is this idea that a very pregnant, very young woman would be making her journey in a day when the only means of transportation would be on her own 2 feet or the back of a donkey. And don't get me started on the whole born of a virgin bit. That's a whole sermon unto itself. The stories that come up for us as we look at the Christmas story remind us that this wasn't an impoverished couple. Only those with abundance were counted and taxed at that time. The inn wasn't full because there was discrimination. The inn was full because everyone was coming to pay their taxes. And we talk about 3 wise men when historians tell us there were at least 12. But guess what those 12 wise men were doing? They were preparing and waiting. They had been waiting, and they continued to prepare. They prepared those costly gifts that they told us of, the frankincense, the gold, and the myrrh. They prepared to present those to the Messiah. They had to travel a distant land in order to find him. They had to set their affairs in order before they could even take off on this excursion. They had to organize a caravan, likely an armed escort, to carry these treasures. They had to make that lengthy journey to Judea on the back of a donkey, 2,000 miles. Do you think that happened overnight? In our nativity scenes, we see this little baby in a manger with the wise men there. But we understand today that it probably took them anywhere from 2 to 7 years to arrive. I've often wondered, when the wise men finally got there and they presented those gifts after such a long and tedious journey, I'm sure they said something like this: Jesus, just to be clear, these are gifts for your birthday, for Hanukkah, and for Christmas. You know, I think about the stories that we've grown up with and how the stories continue to evolve and the stories that we tell ourselves. But when we apply the faculties of our spiritual practice, we can believe in that truth-filled story, that Christmas represents the divine child, the divinity born within each of us, and the divine attributes that we can develop as we learn to express our God nature in human form. Advent is the time of the preparation for that, of making room in our lives for the awareness that, in truth, we are spiritual beings living this human existence, but we are being born anew, not just once a year, every day, consciousness. And so during these 4 Sundays of Advent, we can focus on one attribute of our spiritual nature each week, call it forth into our conscious lives. In this first Holy Week of Advent, let us awaken hope and faith, springing up like Peter from Simon, like the readiness to see your friend off the plane at the concourse. Faith is not believing in something unknown. Faith is knowing what you believe so much that it turns into something. Remember, where you have disbelief, faith has ideas. Where your fear sees that obstacle, faith sees the opportunity. When the human in you sees the problem, the spirit within you sees the potential. And when your anxiety sees lack and limitation, the spirit within you sees abundance and prosperity. Faith is the ability to see the possibilities of life. I want to leave you with a quote by Gandhi, of all people, on this Advent. Gandhi once said that faith is nothing but a living, wide-awake consciousness of God within. Faith is nothing but a living, wide-awake consciousness of God within. For me, faith is knowing what the source within me believes without life needing to prove it to me. Again, what needs to be prepared in our own sense of becoming, of coming to be something made new. Let us seek first the kingdom. Let us put our minds on the spirit that transcends the appearance of things by seeing God's goodness with our faith. Advent is this time to pay attention to every aspect of our lives, to be fully present to both the difficult and the inspiring. And by staying present to all parts of our lives, even with a little distraction, we realize the fullness of who we are, the fullness of life itself. And this beginning, this becoming, allows us the time and the space to nurture a fragile new understanding of who we truly are, just as tenderly as we would care for a tiny, fragile new baby destined to be a king. Thank you all so much. Good to be with you. Happy Advent.